What's up, everyone? It's your boy Norn Radd89 here, starting a Radd movie review series for the Final Destination franchise. Yes, we have Final Destination Bloodlines, which is coming out in a couple weeks. So today I want to discuss and go over these films. I've been rewatching the series. I already watched the first one and the second one again, and I wanted to talk about my thoughts on this first film. Like I said, we got to start out with the OG, the original that came out in 2000. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's start this Final Destination review series. Roll it. So Final Destination from 2000, this is a very, very key horror film in my childhood, basically because this one, I think, is one of those horror films for me that changed the game in terms of the way I viewed horror, the way like the characters were, the way it was creepy. That first film to me, I think, is still, in my opinion, the scariest and the creepiest, and that's why a real reason why I really love it. And we have to talk about, like I said, the cast too. Devon Sawa, Larter, like there's a great cast in here. The great late Tony Todd, we miss you so much. Having him in that first film is just iconic, you know what I mean? So for me, the first film that came out in 2000, like I said, very key because it stamps a certain moment in horror for me as a fan, but also, like I said, in terms of a film, it just brought to life a horror idea that I never thought really could exist, or something I've never seen before. And I come to find out, I thought it was pretty interesting that James Wong, the director of this film, actually started out as a spec script for an episode of X-Files, which I had no idea for the longest time until I started doing research on the film. That's what happened. It started out as a spec script for an episode of X-Files, and then producers eventually kind of talked him into making it a full-length feature film, and then they turned it into, like I said, New Line, turned it into Final Destination with James Wong and him at the writer helm and director helm chair, you know, brought to us one of the most interesting films of the 2000s. Now, I know this film's been out a while, Final Destination, so a lot of people already know the premise of this film, but we're going to kind of breeze over it, is that Devon Sawa plays Alex in this film, and before they get on a plane to Paris, he has a premonition of a horrible crash on this airplane. And when Alex wakes up from the premonition, he kind of goes crazy and is able to convince some people to get off the plane, but then some other people accidentally get thrown off of the plane. So they're survivors from this plane crash that actually ends up happening, and then death starts to stalk them one by one. So yeah, this film, like for me, like I said, key in my Devon Sawa years too, because at this time he was in Idle Hands as well. So just Devon Sawa was a key face in horror at this moment in time. And in terms of, like I said, this first film, the scares, the plot, the way it weaves the story through, I think this one to me is the scariest. I think also the characters, Alex, Clear, Carter, Billy, Todd, Terry, they're all great. Miss Lawton, I love her too, or Miss Luton, I love her character too. And I think all of them, they have these little nuggets of story elements, and I think the characters do the best where they work together. In terms of the characters in all the films and stuff like that, I think the cast in the first film, they jive the best together in terms of their characteristics, the different styles, and where they are as characters, and the balance of how they're different. You know what I mean? Because some people view Alex as just, he's crazy, he saw this stuff, you know, he's nuts. Other people believe him. You know, there's a character in here, Clear, you know, Allie's character, she totally believes him, and that's why she got off the plane. And then there's other characters, you know, like Billy, who wants to use Alex to his advantage. He's like, you know, I'm scared, I don't want to die, you know, and this person said this thing to me, and I kind of, dude, do you know when I'm going to die? You know, kind of stuff like that. Wants to use Alex to his advantage because of his premonition. So I think this is really cool. Plus, Devon Sawa does a lot of heavy lifting. I got to admit that. If it wasn't for Devon as Alex in this film, I would probably not have this like as such a top tier horror film. Like I said, Devon does a lot of heavy lifting with this script, and he's really great, but that's not to say that the other characters aren't cool as well. It's just he's a very, very great lead in this film. Another thing I want to talk about this movie too is the first Final Destination film, I think, does the best too with Devon's premonitions when it comes to Todd's death and Terry and Carter and all the other people that are about to die. Miss Luton, like when he sees images or when he sees things, I like the way they treat it in this first film, because when you watch it in the first one, it's much more like small time messages that you have to interpret. It's not literally like you're seeing a vision of the death, kind of like that first premonition. Like, you know, he sees like the porn magazine that gets cut up by the fan, and then it lands with the paper on his lap and it says Todd's name. The other one, when he's walking back from being interviewed by the cops, which the cops are actually a standout. I really do like the agents in this film too as well. But when Alex's character is walking back from talking with the agents, they let him go, and he sees this guy kind of burning leaves, and you see the leaves and the fire dancing in the wind. Stuff like that. I like the way they treat Alex's premonitions better and his feelings, because Devon sells it better off of, you see that he just literally has a intuition of something's about to happen and who is next. Whereas when you get to, you know, Final Destination 3 and then 4 and then some of the other ones, like, you know, and then 5, the premonitions are kind of a little different and very much CGI heavy. They treat them a lot differently. So there's so many elements to this first film that just stand out to me. Also, like the scene with Tony Todd, I think is one of my favorites, and I think the best scene in all the films. He showed up a couple times in a few of these movies, and I think that first scene in the first movie with Devon and, you know, Clear, they go to visit him and they see him and he's talking about Todd on the table and stuff and what death is, I think is one of my favorite scenes in horror history. So I've been having so many glowing things to say about Final Destination. Like I said, this is one of the best horror films, I think, of the 2000s, clearly. If I was to go any negatives with this film, is that this is kind of mainly because I've seen it so much, so this isn't really a negative to the film. I've seen Final Destination probably 20 plus times, this first film. And when it comes to it, there are parts and are moments where I do check out, but that's not saying it's a bad movie or it's a boring film. That's kind of attributing it to more that I've seen the film so much that it's kind of like the Friday the 13th films. There are times where I'm like, oh, you know, I could check out, I could do something, I could go make something. So that's really not a negative or a slight to the film. It's just that's how many times I've seen this film. I've seen it like 20 plus times. Any other negative I was to say or think about it is a nitpicky thing, is that there are times when it comes to Miss Luton's death and when it comes to Todd's death, I feel like those ones are more like slasher type kills. Like when you watch them and the way they're portrayed and the way they're shot on screen and the music and just the build up to the deaths, it feels much more like a murder scene, like you're watching a slasher actually death stalking them. So that's kind of a nitpicky thing, because I know death is more, when you think of Final Destination, it's more supposed to be what can actually happen to you accident-wise, or things that can go wrong when you walk outside your house or when you go on a roller coaster or when you're driving in a car. Like, it's always those kind of things, you know, that they play on. But specifically with Miss Luton's death and I think Todd's death, they're very vicious and seem more slasher style. But me, like I said, as a fan of the film, I love this film. In terms of the deaths, I love the deaths in this film. I think some of them are impactful and they take a long time, and you're watching the characters, kind of what's going on. They're being stalked. And then there's a couple others like Billy's and Terry's that just come out of nowhere. Even Carter's. I like Carter. Carter's such a great asshole character. He's such a good character that you love to hate, but then you kind of warm up to him by the end of the film, and then he gets his end at the very end, you know what I mean? So yeah, Final Destination for me, this one just stands the test of time because it's got so much elements and so many parts of this franchise that I adore and that are my favorites. But these are just my thoughts and my opinions on the first Final Destination film. Please let me know down below in the comment section, what are your feelings on this first film? This one's a very strong film for me. This one's going to get a 9 out of 10. Like I said, it's a film that I have to literally search out negatives and think about them. And a lot of the negatives, like I said, attribute to just nitpicky things or me seeing the film over and over and over that sometimes I do check out and I get bored with it. But like I said, that's just me, a personal thing, because I've seen the film so many times. But like I said, please share down below your thoughts on the first Final Destination film and have that notification bell poke so you're notified anytime I drop a video, because we're going to be continuing this review series, going to Final Destination 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and then finishing off with Bloodlines, and then eventually ranking all of them. But also share the video. That definitely helps out the channel, and like the video. But most importantly, y'all know what's up. Have a safe and happy day. Peace out.